Hey everyone, I know this is a longer video than I typically produce, but I would ask that you stay through to the end as I really go more of a deep dive into the reasoning and into some showing the differences of all cash and or financing. I talk about the extremes of people that go to the edge and are highly leveraged, where it's all leverage and all debt, to the other side of it where it's paying all very safe and it's all cash. Both have risks. And I would say there is a golden median where you're mitigating the risks of being over leveraged and mitigating the lost opportunity with all cash. So please stay with me. I would encourage you. This is a deeper dive, and hopefully it creates a lot of value for you. Hey everyone, back with a discussion on cash versus financing. But before we get into it, I want you to please like and subscribe. One of the things people have asked me is, why do you wear some Hawaiian shirts every time? I'm doing that as a reminder of my goal of where I'm trying to get to financial freedom and to be able to lay out on the beach. And this Hawaiian shirt I purchased just recently. It came from a movie from a few years ago. So I challenge you, please put in comment, where do you think this shirt came from which movie? But as we get into this, I want to share, is paying all cash for investment properties the best approach? I personally say no. If you want great returns, it is not the best route. And we're going to be talking about that, and stay throughout the video. I'm going to give a specific example, and it will be very eye-opening to you of the differences between paying all cash to getting leverage, healthy loan to value, and having that cash flow and maximizing the returns on your capital. So first we get into it. I want to share, so this is the 5 ways you make money in real estate. Number 1, it's from cash flow. Assuming you're getting a loan. The second is principal pay down. Tax advantages in the tax code. Owning real estate is tax advantaged. The other way you can make money, the way I do it, is from building after construction value. It could be you buy a distressed property and you're doing some renovations. It's after renovation at value, so you can get some forced equity. And then natural appreciation. So if you were to pay all cash, the way this works is, yes, your cash flow does go up. You're making more in cash, but your actual return on your cash, it's going down. So yes, you're making more cash. I think there's nothing wrong with paying more cash and paying all cash down, but it limits your return, and I think you can maximize your returns better. The second thing, from principal pay down, you don't even have that option for that return. And what I share with people is, this comes from a principle is all debt is bad, so I'm going to pay cash, versus what the wealthy do is they understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. Good debt is debt that you have to pay that doesn't earn you any income. Good debt. Bad debt is debt you have to pay. Good debt is leverage that others pay that makes you money. So if we don't have any loans on the property, you don't make that money at all. The next thing that I would share is tax advantages. So with a leveraged property, typically most of it, because of the depreciation expense and interest expense, the excess cash flow that you earn is tax-free. So I would say on an all cash transaction, now that you've paid all cash, yes, you get a portion of it through depreciation, but you start paying income tax. So now your return goes down even more, and your cash goes down because now you're having to pay tax and giving to the government a portion of your returns on your money. Now, to me, that is not the maximum, the best way to use your money, because the reason we're getting into real estate, some of the big reasons, is because it's tax advantaged. Forced equity, no matter what, you're going to get that. So I would call that a push. Going to be similar, but your return is going to go down. So your dollars are going to be the same, but your return's going to go down because you have more cash in it. And for example, say you were purchasing something at 300,000 or 200, the example I'm going to use, 215,000 cash, and you made 50,000 and it was worth more. So now your return's a lot less than if you did leverage and you still had that 50%, 50,000 return. The next is natural appreciation. The actual dollars, man, it's going to be the same, cash or with leverage, but your return on it is lower. So in all of these 5 ways, the only thing that goes up is your cash flow. Everything else, the return on your capital goes down, and you want to hold your money accountable. I would say there is, and what I see people do is they swing one way or the other. They tend to, if people go to the extremes in anything, it tends to be a negative either way. And I would say going all cash is not the best use of money. Example be, I'm going to all putting my money in gold. It's not the best use of money. And then also buying real estate at the razor's edge, where everything has to go perfect. If your business plan is everything has to go perfect, or you lose the property, that is not a good business plan. A good business plan, and you getting into investment properties, you're creating a business. You have to have scenarios that what if it goes sideways or what if it goes down? If your scenarios, if it goes down, you lose the property or you're in deep trouble, that is not a good business plan. So I always share the situation, and I come from a banking background. I watched people in the Great Recession that had properties that they were over leveraged. And when I say over leveraged, if the values, of course, that 100% and you only have 5% down, the ability to sell it, you're in a negative equity position all the way down to my best estimate. And this is why banks look at the minimums typically on traditional financing is 20% equity. There's a reason for that. They figure selling costs in that 9% range. If you are having to sell because things have gotten difficult, typically you're a motivated seller. And if we look at what happens with motivated sellers, they have to sell it at a distressed price. Typically, you're saying, say it's 10%. And in the Great Recession, on average nationwide, prices went down close to 9%. So let's just say you're selling at 10% under retail because you're a motivated seller and distressed. Then you have traditional selling cost is around 9%. So you can get out of it and you're not in a negative equity position, but anything above 80%, lots of times you're in a negative equity position. I would share best practice, and what I would recommend is staying at a 70% loan to value. 70% doesn't mean you have to put 30% down. It could be like I do in the build to rent model, where I'm building them with instantly a 20% equity position, and I'm putting around 10 to 15% down. I'm starting at below 70%. Could be that you've bought one and you're doing renovations and creating that value. I recommend staying at a 70% loan to value or better. Reason being, if you are having to sell and you're a distressed seller, you're selling with the desire to put money in your pocket because you are needing money, not just to sell it and get out. Most of the time you're having to sell it and get cash in your pocket. If you're at a 70% loan to value, with typical scenarios, you're going to be putting at least 10% cash in your pocket when you sell it. So I would recommend staying at best practice is 70% loan to value, be it through you've bought a great property at a discount, or you've bought a property that you put some work in that now creates more value, or doing what I do, the build to rent model with instant equity from the build. You're trying to stay at that 70% or better. Those are things that help you out. That is what I recommend. And here in a minute, we're about to get into it. I'm going to show the difference with a real life scenario of paying cash versus a good equity position, best practice 70% loan to value or just a little better, and what the difference and what the impact is on holding your money accountable. Here we go. I'm going to get into the example, but I had a question I thought I would share too, is would you recommend best practice to keep your equity, that loan to value on every property at 70%? And I recommend each individual property start out at that 70%. Because if you were to get into a situation where you needed to sell, you would have options of which properties to sell, and maybe you chose to sell one that had a less return. I was thinking of an example, literally this morning, we were talking about a client. We manage properties here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they are going through a change in their situation. They're going through a divorce. And if you were at that less loan to value, they are in a negative equity position and they're having struggles, and they have in jeopardy of ruining their credit, but also just they can't get out of it because they don't have the money to pay in. So I really recommend that best practice. I've been in the financial industry for 2 decades, and I've watched this happen over and over and over again. I'm not trying to make it hard. I'm telling you what I've seen through the years. As you are building up your investment portfolio, the ultimate thing that we try to do is we want to keep them long term. If we have a very high leverage and we're at that edge of being over leveraged, we are risking losing our portfolio. And I want to help you. The reason I'm doing this channel is to share my years of experience in the financial industry, both in real estate, owning a sales company, a property management company, coming from commercial banking where I had to underwrite these projects. I watched people do well. They had equity, but I also watched people that were over leveraged and they had some change in their financial condition and they lost everything. So I'm trying to share this with you, and I have a passion for this because I want to help you, not just for today, but for the long term. As I'm trying to build out my portfolio, I'm trying to think through the long term of me, my kids, and my grandkids. I really believe in the principle of stewardship, and that I'm a steward of the resources for where I say from the Lord above, that He's given me these skills to handle these properties, to know how the financial literacy of how to do it, but also the finances, that I want to be a good steward of the rental properties so that at some point my kids and hopefully even grandkids get benefits as we are gone. I really believe in that. I'm trying to teach this for this reason. So I want to get into it now with the actual 2 different scenarios of both all cash and putting some down, and the condition of each of them on the return and holding that return on capital accountable. As I've taught before, there's 4 conditions of money. Dead money, 0 to 4%. Safe money is 5 to 8%. Healthy money is 9 to 13%. And wealthy money is 14% plus. And if you can get higher and higher returns, but still do it in a very safe way, that's how you acquire wealth and build that wealth over the long term. So I thought I'd share this. And here's the scenario. So I'm going to use one that I'm recently built. We built this house for $215,000. It's worth $272. Just got it appraised. And we're going to be discussing the percentage return on capital, but actually the actual cash. And you'll find out that even paying cash, because of what happens with all the money, it's not as much as you think. It is higher. Return is way lower, but the cash difference is not that much. So I'm taking it from not going back to what each individual expense is. You definitely have to save money for taxes and insurance. Best practice is to save 15% for repairs, 5%, long-term capital expenditures, 5%, and vacancy, 5%, for a total of 15%. And maybe you have property management. I'm not showing you that part, but I'm showing the after cash flow of one of my properties and where we're at. So if you were to pay all cash, so now you've put $215,000 down. That does not include then closing costs closing costs for buying the property and something paying all cash. It's still going to be a little bit. You're probably looking at $1,000, putting some of that in. But so say we're just going to use 215, but your cash flow goes up because you don't have that mortgage. So your cash flow on this property, I'm using rents of $21.65. I'm using my scenario of my property. So I paid all cash for it in this scenario. My cash flow goes to $19,000 for the year, versus the other example, I am putting $32,000. Some of that is the down payment. A few thousand of that is I bought down points on my loan, got it at 6.625. And so the total amount down to get it to the 30-year is $32,000. My loan is $185,000. And equity in it. Now I don't have to, on that $32,000 on the 215 actual cost, it's coming out to about 15%. So I'm only putting 15% cash into it, but my loan to value based off the value at 272,000, I'm at a 68% loan to value. But I have leverage on it, but a good loan, it is leveraged because my renters are paying it. The actual cash flow, it's $421 a month, and it's a cash flow of $5,000. But because I only have $32,000 in it, my actual cash on cash return is 15.6%. Going to the second way we make money, principal paydown. You paid cash. You don't have that return. You don't have a loan on it, so that goes away. But because you have a good loan on it, you have leverage, the principal pay down with leverage, $2,000 for the year, which equates to a 6.2% return on my $32,000. Tax advantage. Here's the thing we've talked about. If you pay all cash, you get some depreciation. Of course, you get the expenses for the property, but assuming this scenario, you're going to end up having to pay taxes. I created a scenario of being in the tax bracket of 25%. So you get a depreciation, remembering off the top of my head, or it was around $7,300 in depreciation on this property, but that doesn't equal the whole $19,000. So you're paying income tax on the $12,000, and maybe you're in a state where you have to pay state income tax. I didn't factor that in, but I'm using federal income tax. So now you have a tax liability on the return of $19,000 of about $2,900. So that moves your return from 9% down to 7.6%. In the leverage scenario, you don't have any income tax on this $5,000, and you, as a professional real estate designation, I'm able to take that loss. It's a small loss and ends up being my cash on cash is $5.15 thousand. So now my cash on cash return goes from 15.6 to 15.9. Forced equity stays the same, but I've put $215,000, so my return on that is only 26.5%. With leverage, because I'm using other people's money, I've got $57,000 in equity. The difference between the $272 to $215 cost. Now my return, because I only have $32,000 in it, now my return on my capital is 176%. I'm being very conservative in natural appreciation. Only 2%. I know the historical average is over 4%, but I'm trying to stay conservative in my scenario. I'm just saying it's going to appreciate about 2%. Well, there it's of course, if you paid all cash, 2%, it's a 2% return. But 2% appreciation on that leveraged $32,000, it's actually more, and I put the wrong number on there. It's actually 13.3. So I have that number wrong. It's 13.3. But what is interesting with paying all cash because you had that negative, yes, you make the actual return year one is $77,600. It's a 36% return. That is good money. But I say if you get good debt, which becomes leverage, you can make better money. So I've got $32,000 in it. The difference, it's a return of $68.4 thousand versus $77,000. Not much difference, but my actual return is 211%. So as we think about this and say, you know what? I'm going to use good leverage. I'm going to use the example of if I had the $215,000, what would be the best use of that money? It's not to put it all in one property. With a good, healthy loan to value being at best practice of 70% or less, I could acquire, and I'm going to use round numbers, I could acquire six total properties with that same $215,000, or I can own one property. With 6 properties at that 200, using that $215,000 and using it wisely and holding the return on capital accountable, 6 properties total cash flow would be $30,000 versus $19,000. The assets that I would own with here, one property with all cash, it's worth $272,000. If I own 6 properties at this scenario, I would have control over $1.6 million in property. And my return year one, adding these up 6 times 6 would be $410,000. So this is the scenario I wanted to share. Thank you, Dion, for creating a video that I thought was excellent. I wanted to do one also discussing it and using real world examples of a property that's happening right now and showing which way would be the best way to go. But I also wanted to discuss what is a healthy loan to value and what I've seen over the decades of people that want to create that wealth, secure the property, not just for today, but to secure it for the long term, is having that healthy loan to value starting out at 70%, so that in case things go sideways or go south for all kinds of different reasons, you have options not to jeopardize either losing other properties with it, but also be able to sell it and put cash in your pocket if things go the way you didn't expect them to. Till next time, talk to you later.